I really see this as, in some ways, a really deep spiritual practice. It's a leadership journey, it's a personal journey, and it's spiritual work.
Welcome to Timeless Teachings, everyone. Recently, I have interviewed Steve March from Aletheia Academy, and our conversation was called From Self-Improvement to Unfoldment. And that received so much interest and feedback from you guys and girls and everyone else that today we have another wonderful teacher from Aletheia Academy, and her name is Angie Fox. And we are going to talk about parenting. So, Angie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
A few words about yourself, please. So, who is Angie and how did you come into the space of parenting and teaching parents?
So, I'm Angie Fox, and I'm part of the Aletheia Coach Training School, and we've also launched a parenting program really to help conscious parents who want to parent in a more conscious way. So we bring an unfolding approach to that, which I'll say a little bit more about. I'm also a mother of two. I have two teenagers. My son is nearly 16. My daughter is nearly 14. And there's a little buzz in our household because we're just starting school tomorrow. So it's an exciting time for them. And it's exciting for me to be here with you, getting to talk about this topic that's really near and dear to my heart.
Yep, that's exciting. And I love your story, Angie, and I would ask a few more questions because I know your story and I find it is fascinating to share with our audience today. But before we go into this, let's just say a few words about the methodology so that we create a context when we talk about parenting and unfolding. So what does it mean?
Yeah, so in our school, we take an unfolding approach, whether it's in self-development, for coach training, and for parenting. And what we mean by that is we contrast that to the prevailing paradigm in our society is really one of self-improvement, of one that where people see themselves or we see others as deficient in some way. There's something wrong with us or something that needs a gap that needs to be filled. And so then there's self-improvement is sought out. In our unfolding approach, we actually start from a place of, well, what if nothing is missing? What if our kids are whole and complete as they are, right? And they need support for their growth and for their development and their continuous unfolding. The same thing applies for us as parents too. Parenting has this way of really triggering so much of our own insecurity, so much of our own sense of like, am I doing this right? And so it's really easy to evoke some of our own inner critic or feeling of not good enough. And so we apply this to ourselves as well. We're not deficient as parents. What if we're already whole and complete and unfolding in our parenting journey? So I think a really good example of talking about this is actually turning towards nature, because nature emulates unfolding so beautifully. So if you take the idea of a sunflower, it starts out as a seed, and with the right conditions, with enough nutrients in the soil and water, that seed will send up its first shoots. And then from there, it will start to grow. It will get taller. It will get bigger. It will fill out. Eventually, it will form leaves and a flower. And eventually that flower will then start to make seed again. And nowhere on that journey, when we meet a sunflower seed, do we look at it and say, oh, you poor deficient sunflower, you're not a sunflower yet. We need to fix you. We need to problem solve you, right? It is whole and complete just as it is. It's just on a journey. So we apply that to our children and we can apply that to ourselves, which helps us bring so much more compassion and curiosity into how.
I love it, Angie. And your example with the sunflower, it is so beautiful. And since we talk about children, we could say the same about pregnancy. It's a constant unfoldment. So I could see just more and more humans who understand that parenting starts actually during pregnancy, you could say this way. So we parent ourselves first. And a lot of things that person who is carrying a baby feeling and especially thinking, and it affects and imprints the baby so much. I just spoke recently with a friend of mine who's a psychotherapist, and she's specializing in guiding women through their pregnancy. And we were just talking, for example, about like stress, and that often people say that women who are pregnant should not feel stress. But actually, she was telling me that the studies show that there has to be stress in moderation for a pregnant mom, because the stress creates a very short term of the oxygen deficiency for the baby. And, and then it prepares the baby for the birth, because when the birth starts, the baby will have to go to this oxygen deficiency stage to actually be born. So it's amazing how incredibly wise nature is, and everything what we experience is just right there.
It is such an amazing journey. And, your example there is just such, there's so many of just how intricate the relationship is and how much influence. We talk a lot about the conditions needing to be just right, right? That the conditions are really what makes and allows for this unfolding process to occur, whether it's in the womb or it's outside of the womb as the child's growing.
Yes, absolutely. And as I would like us to dive deeper into the idea of parenting and the way how we would like to share today, let's talk a little bit about our personal lives. I just find it's an interesting example because both you and I have probably not a traditional parenting situation. So would you be comfortable to start sharing with yours?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a divorced mother. My children's father and I divorced about 9 years ago. And, so oftentimes you hear stories of people wanting to stay together until the kids are grown or until a certain age. And, it just felt like our relationship didn't feel like it was one that I wanted my kids to see as the model of this is how a relationship should be. We had really grown apart and our values were shifting in ways that weren't so aligned. And so it really felt to me like the right thing to do for my kids was for us to separate. And it was hard. It wasn't so amicable. Amicable. And our situation was such that we actually did more what we call parallel parenting, where, there were things that the kids would do with me and there was things that they would do with their dad. And it actually worked better for us to not have to come to agreement on things. So it wasn't an easy road. It's definitely smoothed out. But I did meet another man along the way and got married. And he has been a lovely, I'll say, bonus dad to my kids. And yeah, so it's been rich. It's been exciting. And, I've, of course, read a lot of literature along the way. And I've really rested in, it just takes one really solid, sturdy parent who is attuned to their children and attuned to their needs. And so I just learned to rest in that. Like I can only do the best that I can when the kids are with me. And when they're not with me, I have zero control, I have zero influence, and I just need to trust. And in the end, the kids will, they'll find their way.
Thank you so much for sharing it, Angie. I love your story. I find it's really an interesting one. And so my story, I am in my second marriage, and so is my current husband. And interesting, he's also older than me. And so he has a child from a previous marriage. And I know the child since the boy is 5 years old. So now he's 19. It's what, 14 years that I know the child. And for the last, especially like 11, 12, I have been very actively engaged because that's what our marriage, when it came in. And it has been very interesting for me because I remember, of course, when I met my current husband and he just got divorced, and both him and his ex-wife were very nervous how it is in their mind could potentially traumatize the child. So they just tried to do everything they could to minimize that. And the way how they did it is just to be, as human and friendly and empathetic and compassionate towards each other as they could possibly be in this situation. And I must say that probably I'm one of those who got lucky because my husband, ex-wife, is amazing. And I remember like she welcomed me so warmly into the family. And I was so nervous because you hear all those stories about ex-wife, I guess, when you come new in the family. And, so to me, it's interesting, maybe because she was just so kind and compassionate towards me from day one. So from it's naturally translated how I feel about her son, who has been living also with us because we did for many years co-parenting and all kind of different ways. We a kid lived in different households. Like you probably know this. It's like few weeks here, few weeks there, weekends here, weekdays there, the other way around. So we tried all possible scenarios over the years, including like a few years at one household and a few years at a different household, because we also lived in different countries. And so I have been a parent. And this is also, I find, an interesting, you could almost say, identity crisis. And I kept asking myself, am I really a parent? Like, does it really count? Am I as much of a parent, let's say, as his biological mom or his biological dad? And so I remember just having those mental torments for a very long time. And of course, when a child is small, it is very hard to clarify because they are too small, and I wouldn't ask those questions. But when I'm sharing this, what is interesting for me is, I mean, now definitely 18 and 19, and we started having these conversations with him about family and how he lived through divorce and growing up in two different households with parents living in different countries and how it's impacted him and how he feels about everyone. So it was very interesting for me to hear how, in his mind, first of all, he feels that he's not traumatized at all about anything because all people involved tried their best to create just a loving family wherever he is. And so his biological mom also got remarried. So he has two full family sets on both ends. And so he said, usually if you have nuclear family, which is good, then you would have mom and dad. Those are like two wings that help a child to fly. And in his words, that in his situation, he has four wings because there are four adults who have been contributing to his development. And actually, he feels very lucky and very grateful. And he bonds with each parent, whether biological or not, in his own unique way. And I just also want to highlight here, because I find it's important, by no means we are giving any particular advice during this conversation. Right? So you're the only
Right.
one
Yeah.
who knows what is right for you. So if you find yourself in a difficult marriage, I don't know what you should be doing. That's entirely up to you. So the choice to stay or not to stay and how to handle either situation, it's entirely up to you, and it's very individual for each family.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I so appreciate hearing your story too, Yana. And yeah, there's just so many configurations of families out there in our parenting group. There's one woman who had a baby recently in the last year or two, and also married somebody who had four children. So she got four bonus children right out of the gate and then had a newborn. And the bonus children's ages were like they were young children and a couple teenagers, and talk about like really diving into the deep end. And every configuration has struggles. My co-lead with the parenting program at Aletheia, Emma Russell is her name, and she has two kids, and she's married to her husband, and so she hasn't been through divorce. And I just think it's really lovely that as we teach this program together, we have multiple different examples to be able to speak from around, how this can go. Different challenges, some same challenges. Yeah.
So it's like these days, parent is a really big word. So in particular methodology that you guys are using at your academy, let's maybe just again dive a bit more what it is when we talk about unfolding. If you could maybe tell me like a main aspect that you think define this kind of parenting, And how would it be different from what we understand under traditional parenting?
Thanks for asking. So, if we continue kind of this idea of the unfolding approach, we actually start with a way of reorienting, or we call it our reorienting principle. And it's this idea that kids are doing the very best they can with the brains and the bodies that they have. And so, if you start from a place of, well, what if, we hold it more as a question, what if my child is doing the very best they can with the brain and body that they currently have? This applies to my nearly 16-year-old, right? And my 14-year-old. They're in puberty. They're in, junior high and high school, and they're navigating a different social arena, and their bodies and brains are still developing. So it still applies. They don't have the judgment of a 24-year-old yet. So when we hold that kind of a question, when we hold that possibility, it's just so much more generous than, oh, they're doing something wrong and I need to correct that behavior. It has us actually get a little bit more curious, like, I wonder, what's going on for them? What are they thinking about? What are they taking into consideration as they're making that choice? Let me explore it with them. It slows me down sometimes. I start to go back and remember, what was it like for me when I was a teenager? What kinds of things was I getting up to? How was I spending my time? Before I judge how they're wanting to spend their time, let me remember what it was like as a teenager, staying up late and hauling that phone that still had a cord on it all the way to my bedroom and trying to sneak being on the phone way late at night. And that's all the same stuff teenagers are doing now. It's just on a different kind of device. And, so we just find that as a starting point is such a lovely way to really witness unfolding and to be more curious and to approach things with more compassion.
And I love also how we touched upon, when we were preparing for our interview today, the concept of time. I find it fascinating. And since it's called timeless teachings, right? So it is appropriate we talk about time and just the difference of how children, especially I think younger ages, perceive time and how adults and how it clashes and what happens when it clashes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true, especially for young children. They just don't have a sense of time, right? It's meaningless in their world. In our work, we talk about, different depths and 4 different depths that we inhabit. And kids, they tend to inhabit a depth that is very much about living in the flow and in the moment. And the world that they live in is the world of play. And so what happens, there's such a source of suffering that happens for kids and parents when parents all of a sudden are realizing, oh, we're running late. We need to get you to school. Hurry up, put your shoes on. We're going to be late. Like, the word late doesn't really have a lot of meaning to a young child. After a while it does, because they realize that their parent is really getting stressed out. The voice is changing. The energy is changing. They're feeling rushed. They have to stop their play. And so that's a place that really causes a lot of rub between kids and parents. If we can hold this idea of their world is really different than ours, it can have us sometimes ease up a little bit. And it can have us think about, how might we bridge the gap to help them get more easily from their world to ours? We can also think about, how might we join their world from time to time? Especially young kids. Young kids are so hungry for their parents' attention, whether they're playing, making a tea set and wanting to have a little tea party together. Come on, mommy, come join me for a tea. They're in their own world. Let me come join you and meet you there. Your world matters and it's important. The work of childhood really is play. And so the more that we can allow our kids to continue and stay in that play, and we don't have to drag them into the stressful adult world that we live in, the more they can really become who they are meant to be. There's so much less stress when they're playing. They're learning to problem solve. They're learning fine motor skills. They're learning gross motor skills. That is such a way that kids learn. Yeah. And then when I love this story, one of the parents in our cohort recently shared, he has his daughter, I think is 5 or 6. And so every night, bath night is a bit of a struggle. He was saying sometimes it takes 20 minutes chasing her around, trying to get her to take the clothes off to get into the bath and stop the play. And so after this particular session, he was realizing she was playing with an imaginary friend and needed her to start to pick things up. And so he encouraged her and the friend to tidy up and they could go play over here instead, which the child was agreeable to. And then when it was bath time, he said, well, why don't you bring your friend into the bath? You can continue the play there. And he picked up the daughter and pretended to pick up the friend too and carried them both to the bath. And so it didn't take any more time to do that. It just took an understanding of my child's in a different world. How can I help her stay in hers and also join me in mine at the same time? And that little bit of creativity, he was like, this was so smooth and easy and fun and playful.
This is so beautiful, such a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing. And it's also just a great tip. And then, of course, when they start growing up and they're becoming more for teenagers, that becomes the whole other conversation, because often in their mind they feel that they're already adults.
Yeah. Yeah. Just in the last year, I remember having a conversation with my son, who's the older of the two, about, you're entering the time. I just have to warn you, you're entering the time where it feels like your parents are becoming the stupidest people on the planet. I understand that this truth about your world or the world that you're living in right now, like, this is how it is. And, it might just be that maybe we know a thing or two, but yeah, it looks really different with teenagers. Entering their world can look like getting curious about what is it they're listening to and seeing if they'll play it without, the earbuds so you can hear it too. And it's been kind of fun. My son has really started to enjoy some of the 80s rock that I used to listen to. And so then I can enter his world a little bit talking about the different concerts that I've gone to. And, so all of a sudden I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not the same mom to him. I'm a mom that actually used to be like him too. Yeah,
Yes,
they love those kind of stories. Yeah.
exactly. No, it's to continue your funny story. I just recently was playing video games with my bonus son, and that was a hilarious
Ah,
experience because we found a video game where you need two players to play together to achieve a common goal to go to the next level.
oh,
And it reminded me how I used to play a very ancient version of whatever was video game at the time with my older brother. And that was one of those brightest moments in my memory about our bonding experience. And, to your conversation about, especially for teenagers who just suddenly look at the world very differently and their parents very differently. So with my bonus son, since he was 18, probably, we started having these conversations about the adult world. And he just kept telling me, and he still does, how adult he feels, how old he feels, and how mature he feels. And he feels like his childhood has finished and he's like 1,000 years old. And it's not like he knows everything, but that he's fully equipped to handle and make any decision for his greatest benefits. And we had this conversation, but I told him, trust me, you are not. Because I remember myself when I was your age, 17, 18, 19, even 20, where I felt exactly the same. And now looking backwards, I personally regret deeply that my parents didn't intervene with the harder hand and told me, you know what, this is not okay. Like, you should not be doing that. And so, because I felt that I knew everything at this age. And so now this conversation, with my son, when we're talking about it, and I'm still telling him, look, you still have to follow the rules we have at home. Even though you think you know better, you are still a child, even though you think you're not. And you will be a child at least until you turn 21. And then after that, we can talk about it.
yeah. Yeah, well, and the research, the neuroscience, the research is really, it's really looking like it's more like 24 before
Wow.
the brain is really more fully developed and that rational thinking is more fully online. Yeah. So Yeah, it's amazing how, they think they're so grown up and yet there's so much still to learn. And yeah.
Now these days, there's also like so much information about parenting. Of course, our parents and definitely our
Mhm.
grandparents did not have any of that. And I just had the conversation with my mom recently, who is in her 70s. And she was just like, wow, I mean, I wish I had access to everything what moms have these days. I would have done an entire thing so differently. Most of the time around the world, it was either survival after the World War II or the Great Depression or like something like really traumatic on a very fundamental basic survival level, right? So that kind of was what they had to focus on. And then like our parents, I mean, depends on which country you were born and where you grew up. It's the whole this very free, wave of parenting. In some other places, and Asia has always been a bit different. But it's interesting like how our parents just had like a very different view and just very different tools. And now our generation comes in, and I have a friend who is a trauma specialist. And so we had
Mhm.
just this very interesting conversation with her where she said that she believes the purpose of our generation is to heal our traumas so that we can become better
Mm.
parents. And then we give better opportunity and foundation for our kids to deal with what they will need to
Mhm.
deal, which is at least two things. It would be the climate change and AI,
Uh-huh.
which we did not have
Yeah.
in, I mean, they would really have to look at both. And so we didn't have to
Yeah.
deal with that. And so in order for them to be fully equipped to deal with like really world changers in that massive way, so they can't inherit our traumas. And I think also at your school, this is what you're offering. And it's not only through parenting program, but also through all kind of other coaching program to actually, first of all, support parents and their own healing and their own unfoldment, so that it's not like we're, as you said, Angie, rightfully, it is not like we're trying to fix anyone. We are not. It is more helping people to remember that they are complete.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I really believe the greatest gift we can give our kids is to do our own work. One of the beautiful things about children is that they end up being this exquisite mirror for us. Kids, they know inherently how to push our buttons. They know how to, what triggers us. And even if they're not conscious of it, it's unconscious. I'm not a perfect parent. Nobody is. You can't be. But if I hold what's happening, but if there's something that one of my children is doing that's really triggering me, the first place to look is, oh, okay, what's happening for me here? Why am I getting triggered? Let me meet that part of me that's getting triggered, that's frustrated or upset or feeling unloved or unappreciated right now, and bring compassion to that part of me. If I can notice it, if I can name it, if I can bring compassion to it, then I'm a bit more freed up to actually have a conversation with my child about whatever it is that they're doing that's having an impact on me without my baggage, trauma, whatever, that it's much cleaner interaction between us. And what really matters is how safe and secure do they feel with us when they're with us, when they're in our presence, when they're away from us, when they think about coming back to us. That's really the relationship that we're nurturing. And so when we do our own work, when we explore and use our parenting and all the things that are maybe not going as well as we would like, as a way for us to look inward and to actually get to know and work on those things within ourselves. That's the best gift we can give our kids. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
I really see this as, in some ways, a really deep spiritual practice. It's a
Yes.
leadership journey, it's a personal journey, and it's spiritual work.
Definitely parenting. I mean, I'm one of those people who views everything as a spiritual practice in life. Your relationship, your parenting, your business, your everything. You're washing your dishes or cleaning your floor every day. So to me, everything is a spiritual practice. And I just would like to add in a very important part where you said how children feel and the quality of relationship in their eyes. And it reminds me of this beautiful way of looking at it. that the importance that as parents we find time to listen to our children when they're little, to their small problems, right? So the little, I don't know, the little toy get lost, or maybe the bird flew away, or something else, or something else happened there. Because they say that if we don't find time for our children when they're little to share their little problems, when they grow up, they will not share their big problems, because for them, all those problems have always been big. And so I just find this is such a, beautiful reminder. And at the same time, just as you said, Angie, no one is perfect. Every parent makes mistake. And I think striving for some kind of ideal parenting, it's like striving for ideal relationship or ideal anything is unrealistic. It will lead to frustration. So we just do the best we can, the best way we know how, given who we are at this given moment of time. And I find that it is very important also for us as parents to have compassion for ourselves, that it's okay. I forgive myself. I
Yeah.
love myself. I know I did the best I could. And even if I feel that I did some mistakes in parenting, or maybe even for some missed out on some years of my child development, maybe I was away for whatever reason, and I was not there when the child was growing up. And so I find that honesty, vulnerability, humility,
Mhm.
and truth settles all of those things. So then we can always
Yeah.
come to the children, especially when they go a little bit above like teenage and puberty. So there's that understanding. And if we just honest and vulnerable and we say, hey, I know I messed it up, and I know I have not always been the best parent, and I know I have not always been there for you when you needed me, and I'm really sorry. And it hurts me to know that it hurt you. And I feel if we're really honest about it, I mean, child will forgive and understand. And I know a few people like that. When I talk to them, their biggest resentment is that he or she or they have never said sorry or acknowledged
Right.
their mistakes. And if they only did that, child would forgive. And so I
Mhm.
find that, like with our kids, it's almost like there's always opportunity for redemption if we want it. And age is not a limit; it's only our head. And I do find it's important to just be there and have this time and space and build those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. We like to say it's never too late.
Yeah,
So we can own our imperfection. We can share, what it is that we realize we didn't do as well as we would have liked. And, as enlightened as some people might be in their parenting, there's just no way of being a perfect parent, perfectly attuned to their child all the time. And they don't need us to be perfect. They just need us to be good enough. They just need to feel that they're loved, that they're seen, that they're cared for, that they're valued and appreciated, that they matter.
exactly. So I just want to say once again for everyone who is listening or watching right now, whatever you are doing, if your heart is in the right place and deeply in your heart you love your kids and you really wanted them to be happy and you were just doing the best you can in whatever way it is for you, it's good enough. It's important that you also take care of yourself. That's the call, maybe other conversation. Angie and I will have one day. We are coming so soon to the end of this episode. And I just would love to maybe finish with the final question for you, Angie. If you would like now to say something to your kids, actually, and everyone else who are like them, what would you like to say?
Ah, I just feel so honored that I get to be their mother. They have been some of my brightest and best teachers in the world. So I just feel so lucky that I get to help steward them on their way. And yeah, just honored to get to walk this path with them. And Yeah, they're both just beautiful human beings in their own unique, different way.
Thank you so much. And that was Angie Fox with us today on Timeless Teachings podcast. And please remember, guys, to subscribe and like and comment. That's even the more important, especially for this episode. We really would love to hear from you about your parenting style and maybe even perhaps challenges that you're facing. If you feel you just want to share and maybe ask for the advice. I'm not saying that we know it all, but collective does. And you will be surprised if you list your comment with your question, who knows who reads it, and people can support you within a community. So absolutely, if there's something you want to ask, something you want to share, do that. We are here for you. And the whole idea of this platform is create this collective sharing of wisdom with people across the world. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I see you next time. Feel free to share this episode with friends, subscribe to the podcast and YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And remember, you are the master of your own life.